You only get one life. Why would you not want to experience narcotics?
Better call FedEx, because I'm about to ship my pants. Tyler,
Yes, Sean.
how's it going?
I am so tired. I have slept so little in the past 3 days. It's depressing.
I agree. I'm angry
Children
about
are
it.
awful.
Hmm.
Don't have them. Just don't do it. Sean, whatever you do, don't have a kid. Don't have a
Okay,
son.
I won't. I definitely will not have a son, and I will not name him after a missionary.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's really, if you were going for that, that's the best way to not do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oof. Anyways,
Mm.
um,
What are you drinking?
I'm drinking a Monster Energy drink because I'm dying. If I had any amount of whiskey this morning, I would fall asleep in this chair. I guarantee it.
Mm. I
I avoided it like the plague. I'm sorry to disappoint everyone. There will be zero amount of alcohol consumption from me this morning.
mm. I am drinking the last of my not Elijah Craig, um, Evan Williams.
Perfect.
The last of my Evan Williams
Oh yes, Evan.
that I spent $30 on over a month ago. So like I am not unhappy with the monetary
Purchase.
efficiency of this particular drink.
I gave away. What was that whiskey that you told me to buy that I told you I hated? Was it the Aberfeldy 12?
No, Aberfeldy's
No, it was
delicious.
the
Glenfiddich.
Aberfeldy's delicious. The
Uh-huh.
Glenfiddich 12.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm still very tired. The Glenfiddich 12. I gave that to a coworker of mine, an
Uh-huh.
older gentleman
Uh-huh.
by the name of I'm not telling you.
Ah, yes.
I'm not doxing him on the internet. You people that will find it. This guy's not named Terry. Um, um, and I gave it to him, and he said it's one of the best whiskeys that he's ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, good. And he goes, do you want it back? I was like, no. And he goes,
Yeah.
I looked up how much it cost, and I said, I know. That's why I gave it to someone who would drink it.
Yeah, you're
I
literally the
hate it.
only person on the planet who doesn't like Glenfiddich.
I could be, well, for the record, I
uh,
would like to try some other Glenfiddich just because this one
mm-hmm.
is it's the one that was cast in a different kind of barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, gosh darn it. It was not in wine barrels. It was something.
Sherry.
No,
A
no,
lot, a
it
lot of
was
them are done in sherry barrels.
sherry cabinets. I don't remember, but I remember it made it a little bit different, and it made it an extremely vanilla tasting bourbon, and I didn't want it, so
Mm.
I didn't keep it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it'd have to be
But
finished in something in something different, just because in order to be bourbon, it has to be a new barrel. So it has to be done. It has to be aged in a new barrel. It can be finished in another barrel, but um uh,
well, this one was finished inside of an entire barrel of vanilla, is my assumption,
hmm.
without taking out the vanilla, because it tastes so much like vanilla.
Okay, but hear me out. Hear me out.
Mm. Mm.
Finish a whiskey, like a good whiskey, like not crap, and you're gonna understand what I mean when I say crap. But take a whiskey, make a good, really good bourbon, and then finish it in a barrel made of cassia wood.
I don't know what cassia wood tastes like. I've never
Hmm.
eaten any.
You sure have. At the very least, you've eaten the bark of it.
I've had the bark of the cassia tree.
Yes, the bark of the cassia tree, commonly referred to as cinnamon.
That would be so you just get a giant bottle of Fireball,
Yeah, but good.
but good,
No, I'm
but
not gonna knock on
tasty.
Fireball. I actually like it.
I like Fireball just fine. I
Hmm.
did do the thing that was the Facebook conspiracy thing when everyone's like, if you get COVID, your Fireball. And I did. And it helped.
Hmm.
I don't think it cured anything, and not that I know of, but it definitely helped.
Hmm.
Aerate Fireball into your lungs, kids, after you do your heroin.
Now,
It's probably safe.
mhm. um, I did there's a big thing going around that people used to do a lot, and it was Fireball and cream soda, and I did that and I liked it.
Yeah, I think we had that together at
Hmm.
my house at one point
It was good.
just to try it. It was pretty good. It was a summer drink.
Yeah, and then someone made Fireball cupcakes at your house,
That was
and and our
that
mother,
was yes.
yeah, our mother came in and said, "Hey, mother, try the Fireball cupcake." I said, "Okay," and she picked up the the cupcake. She said, "Now you guys cooked all the alcohol out of this, right?" Our mother is definitely a teetotaler, and
Yes.
said, "You guys cooked all the alcohol out of this, right?" I said, "Oh yeah, definitely. It's all cooked out." She goes, took a bite of it. She goes, "Wow, that's really good." And then your wife, your great, wonderful person, who was your wife, said, "We didn't cook the icing."
The icing is very much not a cooked thing that you do not cook. For the record, too, those were absolutely delicious, and Mom would have eaten 5 of them if she wouldn't have said that out loud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
Mom would have been in an interesting state because they were strong.
mm-hmm.
Man, I want Fireball cupcakes now. Those are actually very, very good. We were talking too much about alcohol this morning.
Yeah. Also, I have to say this, kids. This is why you pace yourselves. Like spread out what you're doing. Like I understand if you want to be in a social situation. In a social situation, you want to drink a whole lot. Here's all I'm gonna say. I have never been drunk in my life. I never intend to be. If I ever am, it will not be on purpose. That night, I drank more or consumed more alcohol. I guess most of it was because you guys made way too many Jello shots and they were good, so I ate them.
They were
But
so good.
yeah, but I consumed more alcohol in that setting, that dinner party, whatever you want to call it, than I ever have in any other setting in my life. And it was more than enough than what would have caused me to be drunk, but I spread it out. Don't just do it all at once. If you're gonna do a lot, spread it out.
Same goes with heroin.
Yeah. And get the don't use the American stuff either. Go to get the Vietnamese stuff. It's better.
Oh, the heroin? Yeah.
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 That's why so many Vietnam veterans died of overdoses once they made it back to the States, because they started doing heroin for some reason when they were over in Vietnam. And then
It was really good there.
yeah, it was, and then so they would get, they use heroin and they'd get high and whatever. They'd come back to the United States, and the stuff here was so weak that to get the same high, they just had to use so much of it to get the same effect that they got from the Vietnamese heroin, that they wound up
Thanks,
using.
American drug dealers.
Yeah, they used too much, overdosed, and died.
You know, we don't do disclaimers on the show very often. But I feel unnecessary when coming. We've never done heroin.
And we
don't
honestly don't
necessarily-
recommend you do it either.
We don't actually recommend you do any heroin. You should stay away from heroin. We've talked so much about heroin today. I'm just realizing how many times it's been brought up.
The only heroin you should do is Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman.
It was really good. They're all really good. Don't we have a topic?
Yeah, we do.
Isn't that shocking?
We do. We do. Yes, it's the topic is the case of Charles Dexter Ward.
The Curious Case. No, that's
No,
not what it's
just
called.
the case.
It's just
No.
the case.
Yeah, it's the
I always want to say the Curious Case
Yeah,
because of
the-
Benjamin Button.
The
but
Curious
it's
Case of
just the
Benjamin
case.
Button, and then I wanted to keep wanting to say the Strange Case, and that's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Or Dr. Strangelove.
Mm-hmm.
But
By the
either
way, so if you don't happen to know, if you, and you may or may not, you probably know this, but if you don't know this is going to surprise the crap out of you to learn. Do you know who wrote The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
before you finish your sentence, I think anything would probably something the crap out of me. But go ahead.
Yes, but do you know who wrote The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
I feel like I should know.
It was Robert Louis Stevenson.
Oh yeah.
And
No, that doesn't surprise the crap out of me. I can understand. Yeah, if you wouldn't have known that, it's very surprising because that's
Yeah.
not exactly his mo.
yeah. But anyways, My favorite Robert Louis Stevenson book is
Yes.
Kidnapped, not Treasure Island, by the way.
Mine was the other way around. Kidnapped was boring. I hated Kidnapped. You made me read Kidnapped
I did. It was because it was
a
good.
very, very long time ago. I did not care for that book. Bored the crap out of me. Granted, I was like 11, but bored the crap out of me. Which basically makes this funny story way funnier because you were 9. You were like, check out this book by Robert Louis Stevenson. I'm like, shut up, you 9-year-old.
Speaking of which, I'm freaking 30, Tyler.
Yeah, I know. I was alive when it happened.
Yeah.
You know, that didn't hit me. It didn't hit me at all. I just was 30. I mean, I think I'd already done all the things that 30-year-olds were supposed to do right before I'd turned 30. And so I was already 30. And, I'm going to be honest, I felt better and was probably in better shape than I was 30 than when I was 26 or 27 anyway, so
Yeah,
I'm not really all that mad about it.
Yeah, at 30, everything that you think of 30-year-olds as doing that I wasn't already doing before I was 30, I don't intend to do probably.
Yeah, so like, who cares?
But anyways.
You do have a great beard now, though.
Oh, it's wonderful. I love it.
It's a lot of beard. I cut all mine off again because a baby puked in it.
I bought a battle belt. That's what...
Is that what I saw a picture of the other day that Brooke was wearing?
Yeah,
That's what I thought.
Every 30-year-old needs one. I don't know why you don't have one.
And because I have 12 guitars instead.
You know,
you can make your other choices there.
You could sell one of those guitars and buy everything that I had on my battle belt.
But I don't want to sell them.
Like, that's including the $1,200 pistol.
Here's the problem right now is that the big issue with us doing a podcast and being brothers and having things that we need to tell each other is we end up getting reminded of things that we should have told each other.
Oh, yeah.
And now we're just annoying people with them. Hey, my bookends came in yesterday.
Oh, bookends. Hey,
my Lord of the Rings bookends, they're pretty fantastic.
The Lord of the Rings bookends that you use to hold up books?
They hold up books?
They hold up books? Books like The Case of Charles Dexter Ward?
Well, they're much thicker, as this was more of a short novella, being only 15,500 words long, but yes.
Ah. Well, speaking of
that word count, hold on. How close is that word count? How close is that word count? Hold on.
So did you say 15,500?
I pulled. That's very, very wrong. It's much longer than that.
I know,
but
is that what you said, though?
Oh, hey, can we call it dyslexia? Because it's 51,500. I knew as soon as I said that was way shorter because this is one of his longer works.
Yeah, if it's not the, it's one of the. Yeah, it's up there.
I think
this one in Innsmouth, I think. No. At the Mountains of Madness is the longest.
At the Mountains of Madness is the longest. And what's the one whose name that you always remember and I always forget? Something Kadeth, something Kadeth.
Oh, The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadeth.
The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadeth. Yes, I remembered as you were saying it. I'm taking partial credit. That one's pretty long too. Actually.
You still didn't remember it because it's Kadath. You still.
I will say Kadeth. I will also pronounce Nyarlathotep or Nyarlathotep differently than you do, just because when I hear you say it the opposite way. So.
Yeah, but the thing is though, you sound like a '90s pedophile getting a job at space camp. Welcome, Space Cadet.
Welcome, Space Cadet. Today is the naked space jumping. I'll help you. Anyways, who's doing the stupid short synopsis today? Is it your turn or my turn?
I
think I did the last one.
Yeah,
Go for it.
I'll do. Okay. So there's a young man, I believe he's 17 years old. His name is Charles Dexter Ward, and this is his case. It starts off realizing that he disappeared, and all that was left after he presumably jumped out of his 60-foot window was a cloud of dust. So let's start at the beginning. Nobody liked him because he liked to keep to himself when he was in books, and he was a tall, lanky fellow, and who gave off an air, I believe it said, of clumsiness rather than attractiveness. Awkwardness, not clumsiness. Awkwardness rather than attractiveness. Then he was looking around and he found out that he had an ancestor named Joseph Kerwin, as it tends to as like one does. You find out your ancestors aren't who you thought they were. Then he looked into Joseph Kerwin, and here's what he found. Joseph Kerwin was involved in the Salem witch trials, and they said, we're going to kill you. And he said, no, you're not. I'm going to leave. And they said, no, you're not. Hey, where'd he go? And so they showed up. He showed up to another place, and then he started up a farm and became a merchant and did all this stuff. And it didn't seem to age much, even though he was, almost 100 years old. And then they said, they went up to him and they said, hey, Mr. Kerwin, aren't you a little young to have lived for 100 years? And he said, why, yes. Yes, I am. And then they said, we got to get rid of this guy. And so he made a bunch of sailors disappear, and they said, now we definitely got to get rid of this guy. And then there's like, no, he's, we won't get rid of him. And then he married a girl, and the guy who wanted to marry that girl said, okay, we got to get rid of this guy. And so they got rid of that guy. And they went in with a posse, and they went in to take him out. And they heard a bunch of noises and saw a bunch of fire, and a little kid saw a red frog going up the stairs. And then they said, oh, that was freaky. And they said, never speak of this again. So they didn't. And somehow the story got out after no one ever spoke of it again. Hooray. And then that's what happened. And then they he said, and then Charles Dexter Ward said, I think I need to learn more about this Kerwin fellow. So he learned more about the Kerwin fellow. And he said, you know what? In order to learn more about this Kerwin fellow, I need to go to Europe and talk to some of the people that was alive when he was alive. And they said, don't you know that was 300 years ago? And he said, yep. And I said, okay, carry on. And so he went and talked to those people and found out that who they were, and went and talked to them, and they found out, here's where the burial happened. So he went, did the burial, and found some salt. And so he said, tastes like Kerwin. And so he so he raised him using the salts as one does. And then he said, look, we need to perform the plan. And he said, okay, I'll perform the plan. So he started performing the plan, and things got freaky. And so he said, I don't think I want to perform the plan anymore. And he said, Dr. Willett, I am not going to perform the plan. He said, fantastic. And then later on, we'll just cut to the chase, because there's no mysteries here. You guys know the story. Kerwin said, hey, Charles, are you not going to perform the plan? I said, no, I'm not. He said, okay. And so he choked him, and then went out and pretended to be him. But it didn't work out for him very well, because he didn't understand the modern world as well as Charles did. And so it screwed up his plans a little bit. So he kept to himself for, at least a few months. I think it was over a year. But kept to him. No, it wasn't quite over a year, was it? But it was at least a few months. And they said, hey, you know what? Charles is crazy. And then they said, okay, let's lock him up. And they got in there and they said, you know what? Never mind. Charles may not be crazy. And Dr. Willett said, that's interesting. Let me go in the basement. And he went in the basement, and he found a creature, something that had been raised by the salts, or something that had been created somehow. I don't understand that bit. But this is the overly short synopsis. And then he called up somebody else from Salts and said, "Hey, who are you?" And the thing said, he said, let me do the de-summoning ritual. So he did. Then he's like, hey, wait a minute. I know the de-summoning ritual. So he went in there, and they said, hey, I'd like to talk to Charles, please. And they said, Charles isn't crazy. And he said, you mean Charles isn't Charles? And they said, what? And he said, carry on, and went inside and did the de-summoning ritual on Joseph, and he into dust. The end.
That overly short synopsis is longer than most of ours, because this story is actually dense.
Yeah.
The only thing I don't want to do another one for the sake of doing a joke, but one thing that I thought would have been I said, if I do it, I'm definitely making this joke. So look, when everyone hated young Charles Dexter Ward, so they hated him because like he knew he was strange, and he knew really weird things about the past, because he was summoning all these things, and no one knew he was summoning these things. And he goes, I know a lot about the past. And they're like, oh, you mean like your great grandfather was a carpenter? He goes, no, my great grandfather had a cat who had too few whiskers. it was like that kind of a thing. It's one of the weird details of this that he dives into so much in this story, that he doesn't explain a lot of what he alludes to in this story, and he lets you kind of make up your own mind, which is um very not like Lovecraft. Usually everything is huge amounts of foreboding and over amounts of explanation once you finally get to the thing. And this one, um I don't know. I think this is one of those particular stories that I feel was more heavily influenced by one of his favorite authors, which was Chambers. And for those of you who don't know, that's who wrote The King in Yellow, Robert W. Chambers.
Yeah.
And he loves Robert W. Chambers and alludes to his creation, Hastur. Well, no, his can't no, don't I don't want to say his creation, but his particular favorite deity to write about because he wrote about him. And every once in a while, you'll see him do homages to the people that he likes a lot and his favorite authors.
Speaking
And
of
this
which,
one felt more like that type of story structure.
there's a reference to Edgar Rice Burroughs in this book also. One of the guys who infiltrated the Kerwin house and fought and did all that. One of the people who did that was named John Carter.
Yes, yes, there is that reference in here. And then what the Doctor Willett, Willett makes a comment saying like, "Oh yes, my friend talked about this thing. It's Randolph Carter. Yes, he talked about that." Oh, and I was like, Randolph Carter. I know the name. This is
Yeah.
great.
Oh, and also I have to say this. So this book was written before the other stories, which means that when he wrote the other stories, he used this name on purpose. Like, so this name wasn't a throwback to that name in the other stories, which means that since this story was written before the other stories, his use of that name in the other stories was intentional, knowing that this name existed, then gave meaning to the name later. So it wasn't like him referencing his names, hey look, everything's connected. He used this name and then later gave that name meaning, which means that I think he was trying to make a connection here. And so that's the only thing I can think of, is that he was actively trying to make a connection here.
That's the most. No, keep going. I know you're done. Keep going.
The person who owns the asylum in this book is Dr. Waite.
Yes, this is what's really interesting about this story. So you're making a reference to it being written earlier, and this is actually one of the stories that wasn't published until after he died. So no one read this until after he was dead, but it was written before all these other stories. But if you're a big Lovecraft fan, this is like well, it's full of Easter eggs. Let's say, which is the thing that makes the Lovecraft mythos so cool in general, is that if you're reading all of them have Easter eggs to the other stories, if you will. Because it's not like, when someone writes a series where it's like building and building and building and building. You have a bunch of things that more or less are standalones.
Yeah,
but because they're in the same universe, they reference each other.
Yeah, let me add a caveat to what you just said.
Caveat.
If you read any of Lovecraft's mythos stories, they all have Easter eggs for each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a few exceptions that aren't directly. They're in the mythos in that they're in the same universe, but yeah.
Yeah, but like the like I would say like one that has 0 Easter eggs, I think I'd say completely like The Alchemist. Yeah. And then if you get his books that he wrote before he started writing weird stories, crap, I can't think of the name of it. The hilarious one.
Was about the girl.
Yeah, it was so funny.
I wish I could remember the name of it. It's just satire. It's just dripping with satire. It's not like people are like, oh, this is, you can kind of pick up on the nuances. No, it's so incredibly sarcastic. It's beautiful. But I can't remember the title of it either right now. But yeah, well, I mean, that one is notwithstanding that story that we can't think of the name of. But like The Alchemist,
Sweet Ermengarde.
Sweet Ermengarde. Oh my goodness, it's so funny. But so like The Alchemist, yeah, there's no references to all these other deities and entities and whatever in it, but you get the feeling that it still exists in the world of the rest of the mythos, because we're still dealing with magic or whatever. Technically
Because the potions, the alchemist found a potion for eternal life, which is how he stayed alive to kill all those people. It's implied that it was alchemy that kept Kerwin alive for so long. So
yeah,
it's
it exists in the same universe, but it doesn't connect in the way that in the same way that this story connects with the Whisper in Darkness or Dreams in the Woodhouse. They're connected in that they're more stringently connected, I guess I should say, but technically they're all connected.
I think
I'm gonna
this
pause
is.
this.
Yeah,
Do you have to poop as bad as I do?
I do.
I've got to poop. Can we reconvene in a few minutes while I poop?
Yes.
Okay, bye. Oh, whew, that was violent.
Indeed. Anyways.
Other than that, Bostich.
So here's where the really interesting connection happens between this book, this story, the case of Charles Dexter Ward, and things like Dreams in the Witch House, and it goes back to the old, the old idea of everything we understand is science, everything we don't understand is magic. The more we understand, the more that becomes science. Until we understand it, we treat it as magic, but it's all science.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are these spells and incantations that there is a scientific explanation for it. The only problem is it's an otherworldly scientific explanation. And so it's nothing that the science of our world could ever understand or comprehend. So therefore, it's something that we would always view as magic, but it's still science.
It's interesting that you specifically said what makes this different from Dreams in the Witch House.
Well, I was saying what makes it similar, because the Dreams in the Witch House
is... Oh, what makes it similar? Yes, that's what I was about to say. I thought you said the other way around. Yeah, I was about to say those two particular stories are the ones that take the greatest strides in trying to say, here are real rational explanations for how we came to this thing. And like in Dreams of the Witch House, you got, here's a dude that essentially went crazy because he figured out how this magic actually works.
Mm-hmm. And it turns out that it's mathematical and science. Mm-hmm.
It's math. Once again, math ruins everything.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I still
shocker.
Like, speaking of how it's actually all science, even though it seems like magic because it's alien science.
Aliens.
I have to go back to just how perfectly it worked out, which, it wasn't random. He knew that they were about to pretty soon find something. So because he he kept up on astronomy really well because he was so smart. But it still worked out so perfectly that he published a portion
Whisper in Darkness.
Whisper in Darkness. He published a portion of it because he put it out in sections, and he said that the people from Yuggoth are going to reveal their planet of Yuggoth shortly, and then before the next. So it was published, people read it, and then before the next one was published, they announced they discovered Pluto, and it was so fantastic.
This is when I read Whisper in Darkness, and then I think the very first version of it, the very first time that I read it was actually in a standalone book instead of in a collected series of works or whatever. When you get to the end of it, it explains that timing. And I just remember thinking, how it's so depressing that he was so under-heralded at the time. Because, how cool would it be, to have been around when something like this actually happened? You realize, I might have actually gone insane. If, I'm alive when this happens. Well, crap. Well, now we're going to see a bunch of these, insect aliens. That's cool. I guess any day now.
It was beautiful, though.
I was I would have just believed it. This is true. This is the case.
Yeah. Because it just worked out so well.
It's beautiful timing.
Yeah. But yeah, we have more. I love how anytime we talk about Lovecraft, we never wind up talking about the story. We wind up just talking about Lovecraft just because it's so interconnected. You know.
Yeah, and I think people would probably find that annoying, but it's just so much fun to do.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
actually, not to go meta and break the fourth wall here, but our Lovecraft episodes seem to perform the best.
oh, hey.
Yeah, Lovecraft and Sanderson are our best
Well, then
episodes.
you're welcome. Um, excuse me. For the sake of getting a little bit back on track, um, because why not? I guess
Yeah, can't hurt nothing.
there are a lot of things that aren't very well explained in this particular story. And I don't know if maybe since this was an earlier writing than some of his other ones, maybe he was experimenting with pacing being a little bit differently, because obviously this is paced much differently, because technically speaking, if you read the first section of the book where we are essentially just learning about Joseph Kerwin, one or two tweaks and that would be a standalone Lovecraft story, a completely believable standalone Lovecraft story. um and that would have ended in a very similar way. Like, it would have felt very much um like the horror at Red Hook or something. That
Yeah.
same style of story for the same type of reason, and even kind of a same similar following character arc in the way that you have Kerwin kind of in parallel with the corpulent old man. Gosh darn it.
Nah, I've also
Whatever.
forgot his name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, whatever. The perceived bad guy of the horror Red Hook, who is not the bad guy of the horror Red Hook. But you've got a very parallel type of storyline, very parallel type of character. It feels a lot like that story, and then it switches to what is, for the sake of the writing, modern time, and then the storyline changes into what feels a lot like The Whisper in Darkness. And you wonder if maybe this was him experimenting with a different type of pacing, but also since it wasn't published till after his death, what I'm really wondering is if this wasn't finished. And I say that because Lovecraft wasn't exactly the type of author to leave that many things and that level of importance untold. So like you have the essentially the entity that Willett summons kind of by accident. Well, actually 100% by accident. That ends up really we vaguely understand it's an enemy of the necromancers from Europe and of Kerwin, and that doesn't kill him and leaves him the Latin message. We don't really get much of an explanation of that at all. Just that it really terrifies Kerwin.
The fact that he did summon him.
Yeah, and that it didn't kill him. You don't really get an explanation of the monsters. Because we have real, honest to God, holy crap, look at that, monsters in this story. With virtually zero explanation whatsoever.
Yeah, so...
I mean, you basically get one line from Kerwin going like, they've been there for a while. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So, the monsters that are in there, I would imagine it's like some sort of weird, like, amalgamation of salts and human body parts, and then combined with, like, creatures, so it's like weird combinations of creatures would be my initial guess of what it would be. In the, they give a bit more of a description in the Lovecraft Investigations radio show. They give a bit more of a description of that than what you get in this book. And nothing's ever said other than the description, because a girl goes down there and sees them, and she describes them. And nothing more is said than that. But the way she describes them, and like I said, it said that she falls down into the pit with it. And she sees it, passes out from fear and awe, and then wakes up outside of the pit. And she's more than a little bit crazy for a bit after that. But and the way she gave the description of it, it's heavily implied that it was supposed to be a Shuggoth, that he was trying to make a Shuggoth, and I don't think that's what I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and by the way, I did look into it. They only did 3 full stories. We were talking about that yesterday over text.
By the way, guys, I'm gonna link. You guys gotta check it out. It's not a perfect adaptation. It's changed, and some various things have changed. Like, for example, I'm not gonna go change anything, so you don't. I'm not gonna say what did happen because I don't want to give any kind of spoilers or anything. But I will say the first story they go over, they find a way of perfectly connecting the 3 stories that happened, but in order to make them perfectly connected, they have to change a lot. One of the things that they changed is Joseph Kerwin doesn't strangle and kill in Joseph Kerwin doesn't strangle and kill Charles Dexter Ward in that one. He does something different. And then,
By the way, when Sean says that one, he's referring to this dramatization.
yeah, the
He's
dramatization.
about to say out loud here in a second. I'm going to connect his thoughts for you.
Yeah, and it's called I think I already mentioned the name. It's called the Lovecraft Diaries. They go over the 3 stories of Charles Dexter Ward, Whisperer in Darkness, and Charles Dexter Ward, Whisperer in Darkness, and Shadow over Innsmouth. And they find ways of interconnecting them. You'll see elements from the other stories pulled and brought into it. You'll see things from they take features from Dreams in the Witch House and some features from The Thing on the Doorstep and bring those in and use those to connect the stories, even though those stories are never mentioned or even hinted at. There is one thing that I will say this: they implied in season 2, they accidentally spoiled the fact that there would be a season 3. Season 2 was Whisper in Darkness, and in the Whisper in Darkness, a girl goes to Dunwich in England, and at one point she's talking about looking over this like, wow, this is the view from Dunwich, is what she meant to say. But she accidentally spoiled, because I don't think this couldn't have been on purpose, because it's never brought up that she makes this mistake. So this mistake had to be accidental, and they had to have just not caught it in editing, and it spoiled the fact that they were doing Shadow over Innsmouth next. She looked over the thing, instead of saying, this is the view from Dunwich, she said, this is the view from Ipswich. And I don't think that was intentional, because it's never mentioned that she accidentally said Ipswich, or that Ipswich is a thing. The town of Ipswich isn't even mentioned in Shadow over Innsmouth.
Got him.
But anyways, sorry.
But if you are in fact going to link that podcast,
I'll do a best to remember. If I do it today, I'll link
fantastic.
it. If I do it another day and I don't listen to this part of the podcast again in editing, then I won't link it. We'll have to see.
We highly recommend you listen. They're fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh goodness gracious! We were talking about a thing.
Yeah.
And now I've lost the thing.
Yeah, we were talking about who he summoned. Which, by the way, I think I have a theory on who he summoned.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the people, I forget how he does it, but it's implied that one of the people they have available to summon is Benjamin Franklin. It's kind of implied that's, and I want to believe that's who it was. They summoned Benjamin Franklin, and he's the one that went overseas and tells us we have to stop this guy. And then went overseas and killed that, and it was in the right time frame. You know, this happened in the
plot twist. The reason why Benjamin Franklin went to Europe during the beginning of the war for independence was actually to stop the necromancers in Europe from summoning and creating the end of the world.
No, yeah, that's though. I do have a legitimate theory. It would be all, it would be great if it was Benjamin Franklin, but there's a legitimate theory that makes more sense on who it was. Because who would he have wanted to summon? Who would he have wanted to summon? I don't think he wanted to summon to get knowledge from him. I think he wanted to summon him to say, look at me, look what I've done, haha. And who would be that strong of an enemy of them that he would say, ah, yes, I've been summoned, you need to do this, here's how to do this, take this, do this, and now I must go kill these other necromancers. I'd be willing to bet that, because I think it mentioned that this guy's grave was screwed up, so he would have been ready to be summoned. I would guarantee it was Ezra Whedon.
Be kind of cool.
I'm down with that.
Yeah.
No reason why that can't be a legitimate explanation.
Because I think it said something about Ezra Whedon's grave being dug up, and his headstone smashed, by Kerwin after he was resurrected. Why would he be in there other than to get him out, and then burned him to make the salts, and then raised him. Which by the way, it's implied that that it was not the Providence men who killed Kerwin, and that whatever it was that he summoned in his final moments is what killed him. When he saw that he was losing, said he summoned moment of desperation. Maybe he summoned something too powerful for him, and then, so I don't know what happened. Then maybe what got how that what came of that, but and now I would not be in the slightest bit surprised if the second burning thing that spoke, a burning creature that came out, and that one spoke, said words. I wonder, and maybe there's something that implied that this couldn't be, but I wonder if that burning thing, if one of those wasn't Kerwin. Like he wasn't, like not that Kerwin sent out a burning thing to attack the villagers.
That was right in the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, but he sent out a burning thing to attack the villagers. Then he's like, oh crap, these guys are gonna get me. So he summons something. That thing lights him on fire, and he runs out.
That's pretty hilarious to think about.
Yeah, but or the red frog climbing up the stairs. That could be his charred corpse climbing up to get into the farmhouse, and from there he performed a ritual, and that's how his and the painting has to have something to do with his salts. I don't know what, but he found the corpse, he raised the corpse, and then the painting crumbled into dust. It could be like a Oscar Wilde situation. I'm sure Lovecraft read Wilde. It's like his soul was in there somehow, and that's how he was able to be like so well preserved, kind of. So like if I summoned you by your salts, then like you were there, and whatever, maybe it was a temporary thing or whatever, you're partially summoned. But then if I have a soul that I can put into it, a spirit that goes into it, then it becomes a more permanent deal. And so, because somehow it was when he summoned Kerwin that the painting crumbled into dust, and that was not a coincidence. So I kind of have to assume that it's a wild situation here, But I don't know that. But the salts, I don't think the painting was the salts, because if so, the dust would have been gone. I think he swept up the dust. So the painting crumbled when the salts were used. And I think that's important.
It feels like it should be. This is another one of those stories where like there's so little explanation of so many different things given. You kind of have to speculate about all that crap, which is kind of annoying.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool, but it's also very annoying.
Which the possibility of it being unfinished, I think, is more of a... The possibility of it being unfinished wasn't so much that there was more afterwards. Because you think of an unfinished book, that means the ending, it hasn't come to a full conclusion yet. I don't think it was unfinished in that regard. It came to a very clean conclusion. I think it'd be, or not as clean as you'll ever get from Lovecraft. It came to a good conclusion, a logical conclusion. I think if it was unfinished, we were missing some middle.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was implying. That's it feels like there should be more explanation, even for Lovecraft. There more explanation was needed in there, and would have made more sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this was when he was really starting, really, wetting his teeth on the. Wetting your teeth, is that a saying?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Cutting your teeth.
Cutting his teeth, yeah. Wetting your teeth. And I was thinking that with an H, so like take a wetting. Hey, then you look like
sharpening his teeth.
Yeah. He was cutting his teeth on the extreme horror of the unknown, and he really made it unknown. And there was, it's, it's. Yeah, there's it's good. I know it's a fantastic story, and even how it is, even how it is, it's horrible. So, I'll give him that. Horrible in the the real, the actual sense. Now, that was a horrible story, but the story
It was horrible, but it was horrible.
Yeah, no, it was a fantastic story, but it was horrible. It legitimately was.
Yeah, I think there was another thought that I've had, but I've forgotten it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In addition, I think those are all the things that I was wanting to talk about. In regards to like the things that go along with it, I guess. Yeah, this one for me is one of, if not the most intriguing. Just for me, it is because of the amount of time that he puts into Charles Dexter Ward. I mean, obviously, it's technically about him, but he spends so much time setting up Charles Dexter Ward and giving so much time to letting you see the differences in him and express in a lot of detail the ways in which people were having issues, like, oh, he's changing, he's doing this, he's doing that. It's very strange for Lovecraft, because if you like take that story and like parallel it to oh, I should have come prepared for this. Essentially, it's the story where the guy creates a machine that allows you to see different light waves and stuff, and then has a heart attack when he sees a particular entity, and his friend shoots the machine, and because he died of apoplexy. I can't think of the title right now. I wish I could.
Yeah. Crap.
But
crap. I don't know.
But you have multiple stories in which you get to see Lovecraft write a character who has undergone some drastic changes that concern people because of their knowledge of the unknown in one way or the other. And this is the only one I can think of, or the only one I can give an example of right now, where he takes so much time in going into the details of the changes in the character. It's another reason why I think this was, like you were saying, this is like a cutting your teeth horror story for him, because it's like he's starting to refine his process of that long drawn out sense of doom that is kind of like goes hand in hand with his stuff. Like, it's a slowly building sort of dread that he sets up in his stories. And he's doing it so differently from every other of his well-known stories in this one, to the point where it's like you can see it happening, you can see that he's doing it, but if you would have read this one before the other ones, I don't know if you would have noticed a difference. But if you read all the really popular, if you read Call of Cthulhu and Dreams of the Witch House and Shadow over Innsmouth, and then come back and read the case of Charles Dexter Ward, you're like, well, this isn't as well written, and it's also not his formula, really. That's why it's so interesting to me.
This story was pre-New York, wasn't it?
I want to say yes, but I haven't double-checked that.
Yeah, because we have this very noticeable line where he starts writing, and he wrote, he told stories and wrote a lot even as a child, but he starts like writing and publishing. He's still living in Providence, and then he starts writing. He writes and writes and writes and writes, and then he moves to New York, and the quality of his writing drops while he's in New York, but the quality of the theme, the quality of the story goes up in New York. Then he moves back to Providence, and the quality of the story stays high, and then the quality of the writing goes back up, and maybe even possibly above where it was previously. So you start off with, his baseline was Providence, and then his New York, and like it had a shift. So the stories become better, the writing becomes worse, and then he was back to Providence, and the writing shoots back up. And
You've made this reference before, and I think you've dug into it more than I have. So I don't have anything to say about that. But it is very interesting because you've compared to me. You said like, well, here's an example. Here's the story that was written at this time, and then here's the story that was written at this time.
mm-hmm.
I said that so you would say what were the two examples you always give? You always gave me a particular example.
Yeah. So the examples that I have is let's use this one. Cause let's not use this one because it's unfinished. So let's go back to I've forgotten. This one I think was pre-New York, and there was another decent one. Like a lot of the Kadath stuff, the Dream Quest, and the I think Pickman's Model, I think, was pre-New York. I think that was in Providence. He wrote that in Providence.
Mm-hmm.
And then in New York, he wrote the horror at Red Hook. The Dunwich horror, I think, may have been a little bit later, but the horror at Red Hook, Cool Air, things like that. Those were New York, like good stories, but they weren't really written well. I want to say Beneath the Tomb of the Pharaohs, or whatever it's called. I keep forgetting what it's called. It has like 2 different titles, and I forget which is the correct one. But Under the Pyramids and Beneath the Tomb of the Pharaohs, I think, are the 2 names for it. But that one was written, I think, in New York, but that doesn't really count because he wrote that story for Harry Houdini, about Harry Houdini, kind of.
Right.
So that one doesn't really count. And then back to Providence, you have At the Mountains of Madness was written after Return to Providence. The Shadow over Innsmouth was written after the Return to Providence, I'm pretty sure. The last book he ever published, and a lot of people don't like it. I love it. Dreams in the Witch House.
Oh man. I don't know how anyone can't love it. That's one of my tops.
Yeah, Thing at the Doorstep, Hard to Beat, Whisperer in Darkness. All of those books were written after the return. Stories, I guess, were written after the Return to Providence.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I think it kind of. I never thought about it. I'm not gonna act like I had all these great thoughts. I never thought about it until you brought it up to me. But it is interesting to think about the effect that where he was living had on his mental state and his surroundings. How much, like, if you look at his letters that he wrote to people that had to do with his annoyances with where he was and his annoyances with his life, they really correspond to different quality levels of writing for him. And that's not to be, it's not shocking. I mean, that's probably every author ever. But it's interesting to see those parallels with a horror writer, in the way in which he was writing horror.
You see, that's the thing. HP Lovecraft was obviously autistic, and obviously was a introvert, and so he loved his close-knit group of friends. He loved going to see them and hanging out with them. He'd spend weeks at a time with them, write them letters, tell funny stories. He was a fantastic joke teller and poem writer. A lot of people don't know that about him. He was great in that regard, but he was definitely an introvert and an autist, and he did not like crowds. He did not like lots of people, and he went to New York, and it bugged the crap out of him to be around so many people, and of course then then that plays into why some people thought he was racist. He hated being around people. And then he showed up and he sees all these people. Well, the people that are around him are annoying him because there's so many people. But he's not wealthy. He lives in a poor area, so he's around poor people. And who are the poor people? It's black people and immigrants. And so he says, I'm around these Jews and these Polish and these Negroes. And they said, hey, he's racist. No, he just hates people. Those are the people that were around.
It's like, well, I hate everyone. And here's who's close to me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write about it.
By the way,
He did.
they're saying he's because he hated all those people, he was racist. And yet the people that he mentioned were New York Jews and New York Poles were two of the big people that he mentioned. You know, the white people.
You know, the whites.
Whatever.
Yeah, off subject and no one cares.
Mm-hmm.
But still. Man, I feel like there should be something else to say about that. 'Cause I
There's
feel like
so
I
much
was
more
gonna
to say
was
about
gonna
it,
say that.
but I don't think it's I don't think we're the ones to say it.
Perfect.
Okay, guys, remember this. HP Lovecraft Literary Podcast. If you want some people to go in more detail about the stories, HP Lovecraft Literary Podcast. Their website, if I forget to link it, it's hppodcraft.com. Go there, listen to their Lovecraft stuff. Every time we
They're
do
fantastic.
a podcast about a love tap. Every time we do a pod.
A pod crap.
That's what we should call our podcast from now on. This is pod crap. But
This is pod crap.
every time we do an episode about Lovecraft, after you listen to us, go listen to them about that. They'll go into more detail. We're just rambling about it. They're the ones that go into detail about it. Listen to them. They have some fantastic people on there. One of my favorite homosexuals, Andrew Lehman. He's on there a lot. Am I allowed to say that? I said he's one of my favorites.
I don't know. I don't know what we're allowed to say anymore.
We're allowed to say whatever we want. If I need to check that box that says E, I'll check it.
Andrew Lehman, we love you.
Fantastic man. Keep doing what you're doing. I've yet to join the society, and I really intend to. I just keep forgetting to do it when I have the money. So one
If
time,
we ever join,
yeah,
if
so-
they ever join, they find out what we do, we're getting kicked out.
definitely. So seriously, guys, go join the HP Lovecraft Historical Society, hplhs.com. It used to be .org, but I guess they're no longer a nonprofit. If
Because they're making money.
Yeah, if you can afford to do the thing, don't do it if you're in any kind of financial bind. If you have $100 laying around, go over there, do it. One-time payment of $100. Support what they do. They're doing a great thing. They even made an audio book, Complete Works of H.P. Lovecraft, best audio book in the world. It's beautiful.
It is.
Worth a listen. 55 hours of audio book. Yeah, give it a listen. Do what you do. Have fun. Andrew Lehman and Sean Brandy, the two main guys over there. They're in charge. Go over there if you can become a member. Go over there and support what they do. They're great.
Yes.
They've made movies.
They're bad, but watch them anyways.
All right then, Tyler, give us a snippet to leave on.
So sometimes I find that if you boil apples